Helpfully Yours **** Helpfully Yours by Evelyn E. Smith, illustrated by EMSH. Transcriber's note: this text was produced from Galaxy Science Fiction, February 1955. Extensive research did not uncover any evidence that the U.S. copyright on this publication was renewed. Come down to earth, and stay there, is a humiliating order for somebody with wings. Tarbmore Farch had read all the information on terrestrial customs that was available in the Times morgue before she'd left Fizzbus. And all through the journey she'd studied her brief introduction to terrestrial manners and mores avidly. Perhaps it was a bit over-inspirational in spots, but it had facts in it, too. So she knew that, since the natives were non-elate, she was not to take wing on Earth. She had, however, forgotten to correlate the knowledge of their winglessness with her own vertical habits. As a result, on leaving the tender that had ferried her down from the moon, she looked up instead of right and narrowly escaped death at the jaws of a raging ground car that swerved out onto the field. She recognized it as a taxi from one of the pictures in the handbook. It was a pity, she thought sadly as she was knocked off her feet, that all those lessons she had so carefully learned were to go to waste. But it was only the wind of the car's passage that had thrown her down. As she struggled to get up, hampered by her awkward native skirts, the door of the taxi flew open. A tall young man, a Fisbian, burst out, the soft yellowish-green down on his handsome face bristling with fright until each feather stood out separately. "Miss Moore Farch? Are you all right?" Just a little shaky," she murmured, brushing dirt from her rosy leg feathers. "Too young to be Dro's Mig, too good-looking to be anyone important," she thought glumly. "Must be the office boy." To her surprise, he didn't help her up. Probably it would violate some native taboo if he did, she deduced. The handbook hadn't mentioned anything that seemed to apply, but, after all, a little book like that couldn't cover everything. She could see the young man was embarrassed. His emerald crest was waving to and fro. "I'm Stetson," and he introduced himself awkwardly. "The managing editor." The handsome young employer of her girlish dreams. But perhaps he had a wife on Fizzbus. No, the grand editor made a point of hiring people without families to use as a pretext for expensive vacations on the home planet. As she opened her mouth to say something brilliantly witty, to show she was no ordinary female but a creature of spirit and fire and intelligence, a sudden cacophony of shrill cries and explosions arose, accompanied by bursts of light. Her feathers stood erect and she clung to her employer with both feathered legs. "If these are the friendly diplomatic relations Earth and Fizzbus are supposed to be enjoying," she said, "I'm not enjoying them one bit. They're only taking pictures of you with native equipment," he explained, pulling away from her. What was the matter with him? "You're the first Fisbian woman ever to come to Terra, you know." She certainly did know, and, what was more, she had made the semi-finals for Miss Fizzbus only the year before. Perhaps he had some terrestrial malady he didn't want her to catch. Or could it be that in the 4 years he had spent in voluntary exile on this planet, he had come to prefer the native females? Now it was her turn to shrink from him. He was conversing rapidly in Terran with the chattering natives who milled about them. Although Tarb had been an honors student in Terran back at school, she found herself unable to understand more than an occasional word of what they said. Then she remembered that they were not at the world capital, Ottawa, but another community, New York. Undoubtedly they were all speaking some provincial dialect peculiar to the locality. And nobody at all booed in appreciation, although, she told herself sternly, she really couldn't have expected them to. Standards of beauty were different in different solar systems. At least they were picking up as souvenirs some of the feathers she'd shed in her tumble, which showed they took an interest. Stet turned back to her. These are fellow members of the press. She was able to catch enough of what he said next in Terran to understand that she was being formally introduced to the Aboriginal journalists. Although you could never call the natives attractive, with their squat figures and curiously atrophied vestigial wings, arms, she reminded herself, they were very phisboid in appearance and, with their winglessness cloaked, could have creditably passed for singed Phisbians. Moreover, they seemed friendly, at any rate. The sounds they uttered were welcoming. She began to make the 3 ritual entry chats, but Stat stopped her. Just smile at them, that'll be enough. It didn't seem like enough, but he was the boss. Thank the stars we're through with that, he sighed, as they finally were able to escape their confreres and get into the taxi. I suppose, he added, wriggling inside the clumsy terrestrial jacket which, cut to fit over his wings, did nothing either to improve his figure or to make him look like a native. It was as much of an ordeal for you as for me. Well, I am a little bewildered by it all, Tarb admitted, settling herself as comfortably as possible on the seat cushions. No, don't do that, he cried. Here people don't crouch on seats. They sit, he explained in a kindlier tone. Like this. You mean I have to bend myself in that clumsy way? He nodded. In public, at least. But it's so hard on the wings. I'm losing feathers foot over claw. Yes, but you could. He stopped. Well, anyhow, remember we have to comply with local customs. You see, the terrestrials have those things called arms instead of legs. That is, they have legs, but they use them only for walking. She sighed. I'd read about the arms, but I had no idea the natives would be so primitive as to actually use them. Considering they had no wings, it was very clever of them to make use of the vestigial appendages, he said hotly. If you take their physical limitations into account, they've done a marvelous job with their little planet. They can't fly, they have very little sense of balance, their vision is exceedingly poor, yet, in spite of all that, they have achieved a quite remarkable degree of civilization. He gestured toward the horizontal building arrangements visible through the window. Why, you could almost call those streets. As a matter of fact, the natives do. At the moment, she could take an interest in terrestrial civilization only as it affected her personally. But I'll be able to relax in the office, won't I? To a certain extent, he replied cautiously. You see, we have to use a good deal of native help because, well, our facilities are limited. Oh, she said. Then she remembered that she was on Terra at least partly to demonstrate the pluck of Fisbian femininity. Back on Fisbus, most of the times executives had been dead set against having a woman sent out as Drozmig's assistant. But Group, the grand editor, had overruled them. Time we broke with tradition, he had said. He'd felt she could do the job, and, by the stars, she would justify his faith in her. Sounds like rather a lark, she said hollowly. Stet brightened. That's the girl. His eyes, she noticed, were emerald shading into turquoise, like his crest. I certainly hope you'll like it here. Very wise of Group to send a woman instead of a man, after all. Women, he went on quickly, are so much better at working up the human interest angle. And Drozmig is out of commission most of the time, so it's you who'll actually be in charge of Helpfully Yours. She herself in charge of the column that had achieved interstellar fame in 3 short years. Basically, it had been designed to give guidance, advice and, if necessary, comfort to those Fisbians who found themselves living on Terra, for the Fisbus Times had stood for public service from time immemorial. As Group had put it, we don't run this paper for ourselves, Tub, but for our readers. And the same applies to our terrestrial edition. With the growing development of trade and cultural relations between the 2 planets, the Fisbians on Earth were in ever-increasing number. But they were not the only readers of Helpfully Yours. Reprinted in the parent paper, it was read with edification and pleasure all over Fisbus. Everyone wanted to learn more about the ancient and otherworldly Terran culture. The handbook, a brief introduction to terrestrial manners and mores, owed much of its content to Helpfully Yours. A grateful, almost fulsome, introductory note had said so. But the column truly deserved all the praise that had been lavished upon it by the handbook. How well she had studied the thoughtful letters that filled it and the excellent and well-reasoned advice, erring, if it erred at all, on the side of over-tolerance, that had been given in return. Of course, on Earth, spiritual adjustment apparently was more important than the physical, you could tell that from the questions that were asked. A number of the letters had been reprinted in an appendix to the manual. New York. Dear Senbert Drozmig, when in contact with terrestrial culture, I find myself constantly overawed and weighed down by the knowledge of my own inadequacy. I cannot seem to appreciate the local art forms as disseminated by the jukebox, the comic strip, the tabloid. How can I help myself toward a greater understanding? Hopefully Yours, Nermis Plitt. Dear Mr. Plitt, remember, Orkv was not excavated in a week. It took the terrestrials many centuries to develop their exquisite and esoteric art forms. How can you expect to comprehend them in a few short years? Expose yourself to their art. Work, study, meditate. Understanding will come, I promise you. Helpfully yours, Senbert Drozmig Paris. Dear Senbert Drozmig, to think that I am enjoying the benefits of Terra while my wife and little ones are forced to remain on Fizzbus makes my heart ache. Surely it is not fair that I should have so much and they so little. Imagine the inestimable advantage to the fledgling of even a short contact with terrestrial culture. Why cannot my loved ones come to join me so that we can share all these wonderful spiritual experiences and be enriched by them together? Poignantly yours, Pooley Enox. Dear Mr. Enox, after all, it has been only 5 years since Fisbian spaceships first came into contact with Terra. In keeping with our usual colonial policy, so inappropriate and anachronistic when applied to a well-developed civilization like Terra's, at first only males are allowed to go to the New World until it is made certain over a period of years that the planet is safe for mothers and future mothers of Fizzbus. But Stetson himself, the celebrated and capable editor of the Terran edition of the Fizzbus Times, has taken up your cause, and I promise you that eventually your loved ones will be able to join you. Meanwhile, work, study, meditate. Helpfully yours, Senbert Drozmig. Ottawa. Dear Senbert Drozmig, having just completed a 2-year tour of duty on Earth as part of a diplomatic mission, I am regretfully leaving this fair planet. What books, what objects of art, what, in short, souvenirs shall I take back to Fizzbus which will give our people some small idea of Earth's rich cultural heritage and, at the same time, serve as useful and appropriate gifts for my friends and relatives back home? Inquiringly yours, Solgus Zagroot. Dear Mr. Zagroot, take back nothing but your memories. They will be your best souvenirs. Out of context, any other mementos might convey little, if anything, of the true beauty and advanced spirituality of terrestrial culture, and you might cheapen them were you to use them crassly as souvenirs. Furthermore, it is possible that you, in your ignorance, might unwittingly select some items that give a distorted and false idea of our extra-Fisbian friends. The Fisbian Earth Cultural Commission, sponsored by the Fisbian Times, in conjunction with the Consulate, is preparing a vast program of cultural interchange. Leave it to them to do the great work, for you can be sure they will do it well. And be sure to tell your fellow laborers in the diplomatic vineyards that it is wiser not to send unapproved Terran souvenirs back home. They might cause a fatal misunderstanding between the two worlds. Tell them to spend their time on Earth in working, studying and meditating, rather than shopping. Helpfully yours, Senbert Drozmig. And now she, Tarbmore Farch, herself was going to be the guiding spirit that brought enlightenment and uplift to countless thousands on Terra and millions on Fizzbus. Her name wouldn't appear on the columns, but the reward of having helped should be enough. Besides, Drozmig was due to retire soon. If she proved herself competent, she would take over the column entirely and get the byline. Group had promised faithfully. But what, she wondered, had put Drozmig out of commission. The taxi drew up before a building with a vulgar number of floors showing above ground. Before we, meet the others, Stet suggested, twitching his crest, I was wondering whether you would care to, have dinner with me tonight. This roused Tab from her speculations. Oh, I'd love to. A date with the boss right away. Stet fumbled in his garments for appropriate tokens with which to pay the driver. You're not engaged or anything back home, Miss Morfarch? Why, no, she said. It so happens that I'm not. Splendid. He made an abortive gesture with his leg, then let her get out of the taxi by herself. It makes the natives stare, he explained abashedly. But why shouldn't they? She asked, wondering whether to laugh or not. How could they help but stare? We are different. He must be joking. She ventured a smile. He smiled back, but made no reply. The pavement was hard under her thinly covered soles. Now that walking looked as if it would present a problem, the ban on wing use loomed more threateningly. She had, of course, walked before, on wet days when her wings were waterlogged or in high winds or when she had surface business. However, the sidewalks on Fizzbus were soft and resilient. Now she understood why the terrestrials wore such crippling foot armor, but that didn't make her feel any better about it. A box-shaped machine took the two Fizbians up to the 20th story in twice the time it would have taken them to fly the same distance. Tab supposed that the offices were in an attic instead of a basement because exchange difficulties forced the times to such economy. She wondered ruefully whether her own expense account would also suffer. But it was no time to worry about such sordid matters. Most important right now was making a favorable impression on her co-workers. She did want them to like her. Taking out her compact, she carefully polished her eyeballs. The man at the controls of the machine practically performed a ritual entry chat. Don't do that, Stet ordered in a harsh whisper. But why not? She asked, unable to restrain a trace of belligerence from her voice. He hadn't been very polite himself. The handbook said respectable Terran women make up in public. Why shouldn't I? He sighed. It'll take time for you to catch on, I suppose. There's a lot the handbook can't cover. You'll find the setup here rather different from on Fizzbus, he went on as he kicked open the door neatly lettered the Fizzbus times in both Fizbian and Terran. We've found it expedient to follow the local newspaper practice. For instance, he indicated a small green-feathered man seated at a desk just beyond the railing that bisected the room horizontally. We have a copy editor. What does he do? She asked, confused. He copies news from the other papers, of course. And what are you doing tonight, Miss Morfarch? The copy editor asked, springing up from his desk to execute the 3 ritual entry chats with somewhat more verve than was absolutely necessary. Having dinner with me, Stet said quickly. Pulling rank, old bird. Well, we'll see whether position or sterling worth will win out in the end. As the rest of the staff crowded around Tub, leaping and booing as appreciatively as any girl could want, she managed to snatch a rapid look around. The place wasn't really so very much different from a Fisbian newsroom, once she got over the oddity of going across, not up and down, with the desks, queerly shaped but undeniably desks, arranged side by side instead of one over the other. There were chairs and stools, no perches, but that was to be expected in a wingless society. And it was noisy. Even though the little machines had stopped clattering when she came in, a distant roaring continued, as if, concealed somewhere close by, larger, more sinister machines continued their work. A peculiar smell hung in the air, not unpleasant, exactly, but strange. She sniffed inquiringly. Inkstead said, "What's that?" "Oh, some stuff the boys in the back shop use." The feature writers, he went on quickly, before she could ask what the back shop was, have private offices where they can perch in comfort. He led the way down a corridor, opening doors. "Our drama editor." He indicated a middle-aged man with faded blue feathers, who hung head downward from his perch. "On the lobster trig last night writing a review, so he's catching 51 twinkles now." "Enchanted, Miss Morfarch," the critic said, opening one bright eye. "By a curious chance, it so happens that tonight I have 2 tickets to. Tonight she's going out with me." "Well, I can get tickets to any play, any night." "And you haven't laughed unless you've seen a terrestrial drama. Just say the word, chick." Stet got Tub out of the office and slammed the door shut. "Over here is the office of our food editor," he said, breathing hard, "whom you'll be expected to give a claw to now and then, since your jobs overlap. Can't introduce you to him right now, though, because he's in the hospital with ptomaine poisoning. And this is the office you'll share with Drozmig." Stet opened the door. Underneath the perch, Senbert Drozmig, Dean of Fisbian Journalists, lay on the rug in a sodden stupor, letters to the editor scattered thickly over his shriveled person. The whole room reeked unmistakably of caffeine. Tub shrank back and twined both feet around Stet's. This time he did not repulse her. But how can an educated, cultured man like Senbert Drozmig sink to such depths? It's hard for anyone with even the slightest inclination toward the stuff to resist it here, Stet replied sommely. "I can't deny it, the sale of caffeine is absolutely unrestricted on Earth. Coffee shops all over the place. Coffee served freely at even the best homes. And not only coffee, caffeine is insidiously present in other of their popular beverages." Her eyes bulged sideways. "But how can a so-called civilized people be so depraved? Caffeine doesn't seem to affect them the way it does us. Their nervous systems are so very uncomplicated, one almost envies them." Drozmig stirred restlessly under his blanket of correspondence. "Go back. Fizzbus," he muttered. "Warn you. Too late, like me. Tarb's rose-pink feathers stood on end. She looked apprehensively at Stet. Senbert can't go back because he's in no shape to take the interstellar drive. The young editor was obviously annoyed. He's old and he's a physical wreck. But that certainly doesn't apply to you, Miss Morfarch. He looked long and hard into her eyes. Few years on planet Drosmig groaned, struggling to his wings, ply to anybody. His feathers, Tarb noticed, were an ugly, darkish brown. She had never seen anyone that color before, but she'd heard rumors that too much caffeine could do that to you. At least she hoped it was only the caffeine. For your information, he was almost as bad as this when he came. Stet snapped. Frankly, that's why he was sent here, to get rid of his unfortunate addiction. Group had no idea, when he assigned him to Earth, that there was caffeine on the planet. The old man gave a sardonic laugh as he clumsily made his way to the perch and gripped it with quivering toes. That is, I don't think he knew, Stet said dubiously. Tarb reached over and picked a letter off the floor. The Fisbian characters were clumsy and ill-made, as if someone had formed them with his feet. Could there be such poverty here that individuals existed who could not afford a scripto? The letter didn't read like any that had ever been printed in the column, at least none that had been picked up in the Fizbus edition. New York, dear Senbert Drosmig, I am a subaltern clerk in the shipping department of the Fizbirth Trading Company, Incorporated. Although I have held this post for only 3 months, I have already won the respect and esteem of my superiors through my diligence and good character. My habits are exemplary, I do not gamble, sing, or take caffeine. Earlier today, while engaged in evening meditation at my modest apartments, I was aroused by a peremptory knock at the door. I flung it open. A native stood there with a small case in his hand. Is the house on fire? I asked, wondering which of my few humble possessions I should rescue first. No, he said. I would like to interest you in some brushes. Are the offices of the Fizbirth Trading Company, Inc., on fire? Not to my knowledge, he replied, opening his case. Now I have here a very nice hairbrush, I wanted to give him every chance. Have you come to tell me of any disaster relative to the Fizbirth Trading Company, to myself, or to anyone or anything else with whom or with which I am connected? Why, no, he said. I have come to sell you brushes. Now here is a little number I know you'll like. My company developed it with you folks specially in mind. It's, do you know, sir, that you have wantonly interrupted me in the midst of my meditations, which constitutes an established act of privacy violation. Is that a fact? Now this little item is particularly designed for brushing the wings. At that point, I knocked him down and punched him into insensibility with my feet. Then I summoned the police. To my surprise, they arrested me instead of him. I am writing this letter from jail. I do not like to ask my employers to get me out because, even though I am innocent, you know how a thing like this can leave a smudge on the record. What shall I do? Anxiously yours, Frusmus Blocks. What should he do? Tarb asked, handing Stet the paper. Or is the question academic by now? The letter's 5 days old. Stet sighed. I'll find out whether the consulate has been notified. Native police usually do that, you know. Very thoughtful fellows. If this Blocks hasn't been bailed out already, I'll see that he is. But how will we answer his letter? Advise him to sue for false arrest. Stet smiled. But he has no grounds for false arrest. He is guilty of assault. The native was entirely within his rights in trying to sell him a brush. Now, he put out a foot, brace yourself. Privacy violation is not a crime on Terra. It is perfectly legal. In fact, it does not exist as such. At that point, everything went maroon. When Tarb came to, she found herself lying upon Drozmig's desk. A skin-faced native woman was offering her water and clucking. Are you all right, Tarb, Miss Morfarch? Stet demanded anxiously. Yes. I think so, she murmured, raising herself to a crouch. Better have died, Drozmig groaned from his perch. Fate worse, death, awaits you. Tarb tried to smile. Sorry to have been so much trouble. She stuck out her tongue at both Stet and the native. The woman drew in her breath. Miss Morfarch, Stet reminded Tarb, sticking out the tongue is not an apology on Terra, it is an insult. Fortunately, Miss Snow happens to be perhaps the only Terran who would not be offended. She has become thoroughly acquainted with us and our odd little customs. She even, he beamed at the Terran female, has learned to speak our language. Hail to thee, O visitor from the stars, Miss Snow said in Fisbian. May thy sojourn upon earth be an incessant delight, and may peace and plenty shower their gifts in abundance upon thee. Tarb put her hand to her aching head. I'm very glad to meet you, she said, glad she did not have to get up to make the ritual entry chats. Miss Snow is my right foot, Stet said, but I'm going to be noble and let her act as your secretary until you can learn to operate a typewriter. Secretary. Typewriter. Well, you see, there are no scriptos or superscriptos on Earth, and we can't import any from home because the natives, Miss Snow smiled, don't have the right kind of power here to run psychic installations. All prosifying has to be done directly on prosifying machines or, he paused, by foot. Catch her! Miss Snow exclaimed in Terran. Everything had gone maroon for Tarb again. As she fell, she could hear a sudden thump. It was, she later discovered, Drozmig falling off his perch again, the result of insecure grip, she was given to understand, rather than excessive empathy. I didn't mean, of course, to give you the impression that we actually produce the individual copies of the papers ourselves, Stet explained over the dinner table that night. We have native printers who do that. they've turned out some really remarkable Fisbian-type fonts. Very clever of them, Tarb said, knowing that was what she was expected to say. She glanced around the restaurant. In their low-cut evening garments, the terrestrial females looked much less Fisboid than they had during the day. All that naked-looking skin, one would think they'd want to cover it. Probably they were sick with jealousy of her beautiful rose-colored down, what they could see of it, anyway. Of course, our real problem is getting proofreaders. The proofing machines won't operate here either, of course, and so we need human personnel. But what Fisbian would do such degrading work? We had thought of convict labor, but why mustn't I take off my wrap? Tarb interrupted. No one else is wearing one. Stet coughed. You'll feel much less self-conscious about your wings if you keep it on. And try not to use your feet so conspicuously. I'm sure everyone understands you need them to eat with, but I'm not in the least self-conscious about my wings. On Fizzbus, they were considered rather nice-looking, if I do say so myself. It's better, he said firmly, not to emphasize the differences between the natives and ourselves. You didn't object to wearing a terrestrial costume, did you? No, I realize I must make some concessions to native prudery, but, matter of fact, I've been thinking it would be a good idea for you to wear a stole or a cape or something in the daytime when you go to and from the office. You wouldn't want to make yourself or the Times conspicuous, I'm sure. No, waiter, no coffee. We'll take champagne. I want to try coffee, Tarb said mutinously. Champagne. You'd think I was a fledgling, giving me that bubbly stuff. He looked at her. Now don't be silly, Miss Morfarch. Tarb. I can't let you indulge in such rash experiments. You realize I am responsible for you. Tarb muttered darkly into her coupe maison. Stet raised his eyebrows. What did you say? I was only wondering whether you'd remembered to check on whether that young man, Blocks, ever did get out of jail. Stet snapped his toes. Glad you reminded me. Completely slipped my mind. Let's go and see what happened to him, shall we? As they rose to leave, a dumpy earthwoman rushed up to them, enthusiastically babbling in Terran. Seizing Tarb's foot, she clung to it before the Fisbian girl could do anything to prevent her. Tarb had to spread her wings wide to retain her balance. Her cloak flew off and an adjoining table of diners disappeared beneath it. Stet and the head waiter rushed to the rescue with profuse apologies, Stet's crest undulating as if it concealed a nest of snakes. But Tarb was too much frightened to be calmed. Is this a hostile attack? She shrieked frantically at Stet. Because the handbook never said shaking feet was an Earth custom. No, no. She's a friend. Stet yelled, leaving the diners still struggling with the cloak as he sped back to her. And shaking feet isn't an Earth custom, she thinks it's a Fisbian one. You see. Oh, hell, never mind, I'll explain the whole thing to you later. But she's just greeting you, trying to put you at your ease. It's Belinda Romney, a very important terrestrial. She owns the Solar Press, you must have heard of it even on Fizzbus, biggest news service on the planet. Absolutely wouldn't do to offend her. Mrs. Romney, may I present Miss Morfarch? The woman beamed and continued to gush endlessly. Tell her to let go my foot, Tarb demanded. It's getting so it feels carbonated. He smiled deprecatingly. Now, Tarb, we mustn't be rude. For the first time in her life, Tarb spoke Terran to a terrestrial. She formed the words slowly and carefully. Sorry, we must leave, but we have to go to jail. She looked to Stet for approval, and didn't get it. He started to explain something quickly to the woman. Every time she'd heard him speak Terran, Tarb thought, he seemed to be introducing, explaining or apologizing. It turned out that, through some oversight, the usually thoughtful Terran police department had neglected to inform the Fisbian consul that one of his people had been incarcerated, for the young man had already been tried, found guilty of assault plus contempt of court, and sentenced to pay a large fine. However, after Stet had given his version of the circumstances to a sympathetic judge, the sum was reduced to a nominal one, which the Times paid. But I don't see why you should have paid anything at all, Blocks protested ungratefully. I didn't do anything wrong. You should have made an issue of it. According to Earth laws, you did do wrong, Stet said wearily, and this is Earth. What's more, if we take the matter up, it will naturally get into print. You don't want your employers to hear about it, do you, even if you don't care about making Fisbians look ridiculous to terrestrials? I suppose I wouldn't like Fizzbirth to find out, Blocks conceded. As it is, I'll have to do some fast explaining to account for my not having shown up for nearly a week. I'll say I caught some horrible Earth disease. That'll scare them so much, they'll probably beg me to take another week off. Though I do wish you fellows over at the Times would answer your mail sooner. I'm a regular subscriber, you know. But the same kind of thing's going to happen over and over again, isn't it, Stet? Tarb asked as a taxi took them back to the hotel in which most of the Times staff was domiciled. If privacy doesn't exist on Earth, it's bound to keep occurring. Stet took his attention away from her toes with some difficulty. Some Earth people like privacy, too, but they have to fight for it. Violations aren't legally punishable, that's the only difference. Then surely the terrestrials would understand about us, wouldn't they? She asked eagerly. If they knew how strongly we felt about privacy, maybe they wouldn't violate it, not as much, anyway. I'm sure they're not vicious, just ignorant. And you can't just keep on getting Fisbians out of jail each time they run up against the problem. It would be too expensive, for one thing. Don't worry, he said, pressing her toes. I'll take care of the whole thing. An article in the paper wouldn't really help much, she persisted thoughtfully. and I suppose you must have run at least one already. It would explain to the Fisbians that terrestrials don't regard invasion of privacy as a crime, but it wouldn't tell the terrestrials that Fisbians do. We'll have to think of, you're surely not going to tell me how to run my paper on your first day here, are you? He tried to take the sting out of his words by twining his toes around hers, but she felt guilty. She had been presumptuous. Probably there were lots of things she couldn't understand yet, like why she shouldn't polish her eyeballs in public. Stet had finally explained to her that, while terrestrial women did makeup in public, they didn't scour their irises, ever, and would be startled and horrified to see someone else doing so. But I was horrified to see them raking their feathers in public, Tarb had contended. Combing their hair, my dear. And why not? This is their planet. That was always his answer. I wonder, she speculated, whether he would expect a terrestrial visitor to Fisbus to fly, because, after all, Fisbus is our planet. But she didn't dare broach the question. However, if it was presumptuous of her to make helpful suggestions the first day, it was more than presumptuous of Stet to ask her up to his rooms to see his collection of rare early 20th century terrestrial milk bottles and other antiques. So she just told him courteously that she was tired and wanted to go to roost. And, since the hotel had a whole section fitted up to suit Fisbian requirements, she spent a more comfortable night than she had expected. She awoke the next day full of enthusiasm and ready to start in on the great work at once. Although she might have been a little too forward the previous night, she knew, as she took a reassuring glance in the mirror, that Stet would forgive her. In the office, she was, at first, somewhat self-conscious about Drozmig, who hung insecurely from his perch muttering to himself, but she soon forgot him in her preoccupation with duty. The first letter she picked up, although again oddly unlike the ones she'd read in the paper on Fisbus, seemed so simple that she felt she would have no difficulty in answering it all by herself. Heidelberg, dear Senbert Drozmig, I am a professor of Fisbian history at a local university. Since my salary is a small one, owing to the small esteem in which the natives hold culture, I must economize wherever I can in order to make both ends meet. Accordingly, I do my own cooking and shop at the self-service supermarket around the corner, where I have found that prices are lower than in the service groceries and the food no worse. However, the manager and a number of the customers have objected to my shopping with my feet. They don't so much mind my taking packages off the shelves with them, but they have been quite vociferous on the subject of my pinching the fruit with my toes. Unripe fruit, however, makes me ill. What shall I do? Sincerely yours, Grisby Groot. Tarb dictated an unhesitating reply. Dear Professor B. Groot, why don't you explain to the manager of the store that Fisbians have wings and feet rather than arms and hands? I'm sure his attitude and the attitudes of his customers will change when they learn that your pinching the fruit with your feet is not mere pedagogical eccentricity, but the regular practice on our planet. Point out to him that your feet are covered and, therefore, more sanitary than the bare hands of his other customers. And always put on clean socks before you go shopping. Helpfully yours, Senbert Drozmig. Miss Snow raised pale eyebrows. Is something wrong? Tarb asked anxiously. Should I have put in that bit about work, study, meditate? It seems inappropriate somehow. Oh, no, not that. It's just that your letter, well, violates Mr. Zenon's precept that, in Rome, one must do as the Romans do. But this isn't Rome, Tarb replied, bewildered. It's New York. He didn't make the saying up, Miss Snow replied testily. It's a terrestrial proverb. Oh, Tarb said. She resented this creature's trying to tell her how to do her job. On the other hand, Tarb was wise enough to realize that Miss Snow, unpleasant though she might be, probably did know Stet well enough to be able to predict his reactions. So Tarb not only was reluctant to show Stet what she had already done, but hesitated about answering another and even more urgent letter that had just been brought in by special messenger. She tried to compromise by submitting the letters to Drozmig, for, technically speaking, it was he who was her immediate superior, but he merely groaned, "Tell em all to drop dead from his perch," and refused to open his eyes. In the end, Tarb had to take the letters to Stet's office. Miss Snow trailed along behind her, uninvited. And, since this was a place of business, Tarb could not claim a privacy violation. Even if it weren't a place of business, she remembered, she couldn't, not here on Earth. Advanced spirituality, ha! Advanced pain in the pinions. Stet read the first letter and her answer smilingly. Excellent, Tarb, her heart leaped, for a first try, but I'd like to suggest a few changes, if I may. Well, of course, she said, pretending not to notice the smirk on Miss Snow's face. Just write this Professor Bigoot that he should do his shopping at a grocery that offers service and practice his economies elsewhere. A professor, of all people, is expected to uphold the dignity of his own race. The idea, sneering at a culture that was thousands of years old when we were still building nests. Terrestrials couldn't possibly have any respect for him if they saw him prodding kumquats with his toes. It's no sillier than writing with one's vestigial wings. Tarb blazed. Well! Miss Snow exclaimed in Terran. Well, really? Tarb started to stick out her tongue, then remembered. I didn't mean to offend you, Miss Snow. I know it's your custom. But wouldn't you understand if I typewrote with my feet? Miss Snow tittered. If you want the honest truth, hun, it would make you look like a feathered monkey. If you want the honest truth about what you look like to me, dearie, it's a plucked chicken. Tarb, I think you should apologize to Miss Snow. All right. Tarb stuck out her tongue. Miss Snow promptly thrust out hers in return. Ladies, ladies! Stet cried. I think there has been a slight confusion of folkways. He quickly changed the subject. Is that another letter you have there, Tub? Yes, but I didn't try to answer it. I thought you'd better have a look at it first, since Miss Snow didn't seem to think much of the job I did with the other one. Miss Snow always has the Times welfare at heart, Stet remarked ambiguously, and read, Chicago December Dros Mig. I am employed as translator by the extraterrestrial division of Burns and Deerort, Inc., the well-known interstellar mail order house. As the company employs no other Fisbians and our offices are situated in a small rural community where no others of our race reside, I find myself rather lonely. Moreover, being a bachelor, with neither chick nor child on Fisbus, I have nothing to look forward to upon my return to the home planet someday. Accordingly, I decided to adopt a child to cheer my declining years. I dispatched an interstellogram to a reliable orphanage on Fisbus, outlining my hopes and requirements in some detail. After they had satisfied themselves as to my income, strength of character, etc., they sent me a fatherless and motherless egg in cold storage, which I was supposed to hatch upon arrival. However, when the egg came to Earth, it was impounded by customs. They say it is forbidden to import extrasolar eggs. I have tried to explain to them that it is not at all a question of importation but of adoption, however, they cannot or will not understand. Please tell me what to do. I fear that they may not be keeping the egg at the correct Fisbian freezing point, which, as you know, is a good deal lower than Earth's. The fledgling may hatch by itself and receive a traumatic shock that might very well damage its entire psyche permanently. Frantically yours, Glibmus Gluito, for the stars Sake. Stet exploded. This is really too much. Viz our consul, Miss Snow. That egg must go back to Fisbus at once, before any terrestrials hear of it. And I must notify the government back on the home planet to keep a close check on all egg shipments. Something like this must certainly not occur again. Why shouldn't the terrestrials hear of it? Tarb asked, outraged. And I think it's mean of you to send back a poor little orphan egg like that when it has a chance of getting a good home. An egg? Miss Snow repeated incredulously. You mean you really? She gave me one mad little hoot of laughter and then stopped and strangled slightly. Her face turned purple in her efforts to restrain mirth. Really, Tarb thought, she looks so much better that color. Stet's crest twitched violently. I hope, he began. I do hope you will keep this knowledge to yourself, Miss Snow. But of course, she assured him, calming down. I'm dreadfully sorry I was so rude. Naturally I wouldn't dream of telling a soul, Mr. Zenon. You can trust me. I'm sure I can, Miss Snow. Tarb almost choked with indignation. You mean you've been keeping the facts of our life from terrestrials? As if they were fledglings. No, even fledglings are told these days. One could hardly blame him for it, Miss Morfarch. Miss Snow said. You wouldn't want people to know that Fisbians laid eggs, would you? And why not? Tarbstet intervened. You don't know what you're talking about. Oh, don't I? You're ashamed of the fact that we bear our children in a clean, decent, honorable way instead of. She stopped. I'm being as bad as you two are. Probably the terrestrials' way of reproduction doesn't seem dirty to them, but, since they do reproduce that way, they could scarcely find our way objectionable. Tub, that's not how a young girl should talk. Oh, go lay an egg, she said, knowing that she had overstepped the limits of propriety, but unable to let him get away with that. I hope to be a wife and mother someday, she added, and I only hope that when that time comes, I'll be able to lay good eggs. Miss Morfarchstedt said, keeping control of his temper with a visible effort, that will be enough from you. If common decency doesn't restrain you, please remember that I am your employer and that I set the policies on my paper. You'll do what you're told and keep a civil tongue in your head or you'll be sent back to Fizzbus. Do I make myself clear? You do, indeed, Tab said. How could she ever have thought he was charming and handsome? Well, perhaps he still was handsome, but fine feathers do not make fine deeds. And, if it came to that, it wasn't his paper. We have the same thing on Terra, Miss Snow murmured sympathetically to Stet. These young whippersnappers think they can start in running the paper the very first day. Why, Belinda Romney herself, she's a distant cousin of mine, you know, told me, Miss Snow Tab said. I hope for the sake of Earth that you are not a typical example of the terrestrial species. And you, hun, Miss Snow retorted, don't belong on a paper, but in a chicken coop. Ladies, Stet said helplessly. Women, he muttered, certainly do not belong on a newspaper. Matter of fact, they don't belong anywhere, their place is in the home only because there's nowhere else to put them. Both females glared at him. During the next fortnight, Tab gained fluency in Terran and also learned to operate a terrestrial typewriter equipped with Fisbian type, mostly so that she could dispense with the services of the invaluable Miss Snow. She didn't like typing, though, it chipped her toenails and her temper. Besides, Drozmig kept complaining that the noise prevented him from sleeping and she preferred him to sleep rather than hang there making irrelevant and, sometimes, unpleasantly relevant remarks. Longing for the old scripto, one of the cameramen smiled as he lounged in the open doorway of her office. Although she was fond of fresh air, Tab realized that she would have to keep the door shut from now on. Too many of the younger members of the staff kept booing at her as they passed, and now they had formed the habit of dropping in to offer her advice, encouragement and invitations to meals. At first, the attention had pleased her, but now she was much too busy to be bothered. She was going to turn out acceptable answers to those letters or die trying. Well, if the power can't be converted, it can't, she said grimly. Griblow, I do wish you'd be a dear and flutter off. He snorted. Who says the power can't be converted? Stet, ha. She took her feet off the keys and looked at him. Why do you say Stet that way? because that's a lot of birdseed he gives you about not being able to convert earth power. Could be done all right, but he and the consul have it all fixed up to keep Fisbian technology off the planet. Consul's probably being paid off by the International Association of Manufacturers and Stets in it for the preservation of indigenous culture, and maybe a little cash, too. After all, those rare antique collections of his cost money. I don't believe it. Tarb snapped. Griblow, please, I have so much work to get through. Okay, chick, but I warn you, you're going to have your bright-eyed illusions shattered. Why don't you wake up to the truth about Stet? What you should do is maybe eschew the Society of All Journalists entirely, and a sordid lot they are, and devote yourself to photographers, splendid fellows, all. Please shut the door behind you. The door slammed. Tarb gazed disconsolately at the letter before her. Would she ever be able to answer letters to Stet's satisfaction? The purpose of the whole column was service, but did she and Stet mean the same thing by the same word? Or, if they did, whom was Stet serving? She was paying too much attention to Griblow's idle remarks. Obviously he was a sorehead, had some kind of grudge against Stet. Perhaps Stet was a bit too autocratic, perhaps he had even gone native to some extent, but you couldn't say anything worse about him than that. All in all, he wasn't a bad bird, and she mustn't let herself be influenced by rumormongers like Griblow. Tarb got up and took the letter to Stet. He was in his office dictating to Miss Snow. After all, Tarb could not repress the ugly thought, why should he care about the scriptos? He'll never have to use a typewriter. And he was perfectly nice about being interrupted. The only thing he didn't like was being contradicted. I'm getting bitter, she told herself in surprise. And at my age, too. I wonder what I'll be like when I'm old. This thought alarmed her, and so she smiled very sweetly at Stet as she murmured, "Would you mind reading this?" and gave him the letter. "Run into another little snag, eh?" he said affably, giving her foot a gentle pat with his. "Well, let's see what we can do about it. Montreal dear Senbert Drosmig, I am a chef at the Café Interstellaire, which, as everyone knows, is one of the most chic eating establishments on this not very chic planet. During my spare moments, I am a great amateur of the local form of entertainment known as television. I am especially fascinated by the native actress Ingeborg Swedenborg, who, in spite of being a Terran, compares most favorably with our own Fisbian footlight favorites. The other day, while I am in the kitchen engaged in preparing the ragout celeste la Fisb for which I am justly celebrated on 9 planets, I hear a stir outside in the dining room. I strain my ears. I hear the cry, "It is Ingeborg Swedenborg." I cannot help myself. I rush to the doorway. There, behold, the incomparable Ingeborg herself. She follows the head waiter to a choice table. She is even more ravishing in real life than on the screen. On her, it does not matter that she has no feathers save on the head, even skin looks good. Overcome by involuntary ardor, I boo at her. Whereupon I am violently assailed by a powerfully built native whom I have not previously noticed to be escorting her. I am rescued before he can do me any permanent damage, though, if you wish the truth, it will be a long time before I can fly again. However, I am given notice by the cold-hearted management. Now I am without a job. And what is more, if on this planet one is not permitted to express one's instinctive and natural admiration for a beautiful woman, then all I have to say is that it is a lousy planet and I wiggle my toes at it. How do I go about getting deported? Impatiently yours, Ray Joyce Ludlow. I suppose it serves him right, Tarb said quickly, before Stet could comment, but don't you think it would be a good idea if the Times got up a Fisbian terrestrial handbook of its own? It's the only solution that I can see. The regular one, I recognize now, is more than inadequate, with all that spiritual gup. Miss Snow drew in her breath sharply, and not much else. All these problems are bound to arise again and again. Frankly speaking, Stet, your solutions only take care of the individual cases, they don't establish a sound intercultural basis. He grunted. What's more, she went on eagerly, we could not only give copies to every Fisbian planning to visit Earth, but also print copies in Terran for terrestrials who are interested in learning more about Fisbus and the Fisbians. In fact, all Terrans who come in contact with us should have the book. It would help both races to understand each other so much better and unnecessary. Stet snapped, so violently that she stopped with her mouth open. The standard handbook is more than adequate. Whatever limitations it may have are deliberate. Setting down in cold print all that stuff you want to have included would make a point of things we prefer not to stress. I wouldn't want to have the terrestrials humor me as if I were a fledgling or a foreigner. He leaped out of his chair and paced up and down the office. One would think he had forgotten he ever could fly. But you are a foreigner, Stet Tarb said gently. No matter what you do or say, terrestrials and Fisbians are, well, worlds apart. Spiritually, I am much closer to the terrestrials than, but you wouldn't understand. He and Miss Snow nodded sympathetically at each other. And you might be interested to know that I happen to be the author of all that spiritual gup. I wrote the handbook, as a service to Fisbus, I might point out. I wasn't paid for it. Oh, dear. Tarb said. Oh, dear. I really and truly am sorry, Stet. He brushed her apologies aside. Answer that letter. Ignore the question about deportation entirely. He ran a foot through his crest. Just tell the fellow to see our personnel manager. We could use a chef in the company dining room. Haven't tasted a decent celestial ragu, at a price I could afford, since I left Fisbus. Would you want me to print that reply in the column? She asked. If you lose your job because you're unfamiliar with terrestrial customs, come to the Times. We'll give you another job at a much lower salary. Of course not. Send your answer directly to him. You don't think we put any of those letters you've been answering in the column, do you? Or any that come in at all, for that matter. I have to write all the letters that are printed, and answer them myself. I should have recognized the style, Tab said. So this is the service the Times offers to its subscribers. Nothing that would be of help. Nothing that could prevent other Fisbians from making the same mistake. Nothing that could be controversial. Nothing that would help terrestrials to understand us. Nothing, in short, but a lot of birdseed impertinence. Miss Snow remarked. You shouldn't let her talk to you like that, Mr. Zenon. Tub. Stet roared, casting an impatient glance at Miss Snow. How dare you talk to me in that way? And all this is none of your business, anyway. I'm a Fisbian, she stated, and it certainly is my business. I'm not ashamed of having wings. I'm proud of them and sorry for people who don't have them. And, by the stars, I'm going to fly. If skirts are improper to wear for flying, then I can wear slacks. I saw them in a terrestrial fashion magazine and they're perfectly respectable. Not for working hours, Miss Snow sniffed. I have no intention of flying during working hours, Tab snapped back. Even you should be able to see that the ceiling's much too low. Stet ran a foot through his crest again. I hate to say this, Tub, but I don't feel you're the right person for this job. You mean well, I'm sure, but you're too inflexible. You mean I have principles, she retorted, and you don't. Which wasn't entirely true, he had principles, it was just that they were unprincipled. That will be enough, Tab, he said sternly. You'd better go now while I think this over. I'd hate to send you back to Fizzbus, because I'd miss you. On the other hand, Tab went back to her office and drafted a long interstell to a cousin on Fizzbus, explaining what she would like for a birthday present. And send it special delivery, she concluded, because I am having an urgent and early birthday. Tab more fudge. Stet howled, a few months later. What on earth are you doing? Dictating into my scripto, Tab said cheerfully. Some of the boys from the print shop helped fix it up for me. They were very nice about it, too, considering that the superscriptos will probably throw them out of work. You know, Stet, terrestrials can be quite decent people. Where did you get that scripto? Cousin Muffis sent it to me for my birthday. I must have complained about wearing out my claws on a typewriter and he didn't understand that scriptos won't work on Earth. Only they do. She beamed at her employer. All it needed was a transformer. I guess you're just not mechanically minded, Stet. He clenched his feet. Tub, terrestrials aren't ready for our technology. You've done a very unwise thing in having that scripto sent to you. And I've done a very unwise thing in keeping you here against my better judgment. Maybe the terrestrials aren't ready, she said, ignoring his last remark, but I'm not going to wear my feet to the bone if I can get a gadget that'll do the same thing with no expenditure of physical energy. She placed a foot on his. I don't see how a thing like this could possibly corrupt the terrestrials, Stet. It's made a better, brighter girl out of me already. Here, said Drozmig hoarsely from his perch. Shut up, Senbert. You just don't understand, Tub. If you'll only, but I'm afraid I do understand, Stet. And I won't send my scripto back. May I come in? Miss Snow tapped lightly on the door frame. Is what I hear true? About the scripto? Tarb asked. It certainly is. All you have to do is talk into it and the words appear on the paper. Guess that makes you obsolete, doesn't it, Miss Snow? And high time, too, commented Drozmig. Never liked the old biddy. Senbert. Stet began, and stopped. Oh, what's the use trying to talk reasonably to either of you? Tub, come back to my office with me. She could not refuse, and so she followed. Miss Snow, torn between curiosity and the scripto, hesitated and then made after them. I've decided to take you off the column, for this morning, anyway, and send you on an outside assignment, Stet told Tub. The consul's wife is coming to Earth today. Once she heard there was another woman on Terra, nothing could stop her. Consul seems to think it's my fault, too, he added moodily. Won't believe I had nothing to do with hiring you. I told the Home Office not to send a woman, that she'd disrupt the office, and you sure as hell have. But I thought you said in your letters that you were doing everything in your power to bring Fisbian womenfolk to their men on Terra. Tarb pointed out malevolently. Yes, he confessed. We must please our readers. You know that. Anyway, all that's irrelevant right now. What I want you to do is go meet the consul's wife. Nice touch, having the only other Fisbian woman here be the one to interview her. Human interest angle for the terrestrial papers. Shouldn't be surprised if Solar Press picked it up, they like items of that kind for fillers. Take Gryblow along with you and make sure he has film in his camera this time. Yes, Sir, Tarb said. Anything you say, sir. He pretended not to notice her sarcasm. I have a list of the questions you should ask her. He fixed her with his eye. You stick to them, do you hear me? I don't want anything controversial. He rummaged among the papers on his desk. I know I had it half an hour ago. Sit down, will you, Tub? Stop hopping around. If I can't have a perch, I want a stool, Tub said. This is a private office and I think it's a gross affectation for you to have those silly, uncomfortable chairs in it. If you would have your wings clipped like Mr. Zenon's, Miss Snow began before Stet could stop her. Stet, you didn't. His crest thrashed back and forth. They'll grow back again and it's so much more convenient this way. After all, I can't use them here and I do have to associate with terrestrials and use their equipment. The consul has had his wings clipped also, and so have several of our more prominent industrialists. Oh, Stet! Tarb wailed. I was beginning to think some pretty hard things about you, but I wouldn't ever have dreamed you'd do anything as awful as that. Why should I have to apologize to you? He raged. Who do you think you are, anyway? You're an incompetent little fool. I should have fired you that first day. I've let you get away with so much only because you have a pretty face. You've only been on Earth a couple of months. How can you presume to think you know what's good and what's bad for the Fisbians here? I may not know what's good, she retorted, but I certainly do know what's bad. And that's you, Stet, you and everything you stand for. You not only don't have the courage of your convictions, you don't even have any convictions. You're ashamed of being a Fisbian, ashamed of anything that makes Fisbians different from terrestrials, even if it's something better, something that most Terrans would like to have. You're a damned hypocrite, Stetsonen, that's what you are. Professing to help our people when actually you're hurting them by trying to force them into the mold of an alien species. She brushed back her crest. I take it I'm fired, she said more quietly. Do you want me to interview the consul's wife first or leave right away? It took Stet a moment to bring his voice under control. Interview her first. We'll talk this over when you get back. It was pleasant to be away from the office, she thought as the taxi pulled toward the airfield, and doing wing work again, even if it proved to be the first and last time on this planet. Gryblow sat hunched in a corner of the seat, too preoccupied with the camera, which, even after 2 years, he hadn't fully mastered, to pay attention to her. Outside, it was raining, the kind of thin drizzle that, on Fizzbus or Earth, could go on for days. Tarb had brought along the native umbrella she had purchased in the hotel gift shop, a delightful contraption that was supposed to keep off the rain and didn't, and was supposed to collapse and did, but at the wrong moments. She planned to take it back with her when she returned to Fizzbus. Approved souvenir or not, it was the same beautiful purple as her eyes. And, besides, who had made the ruling about approved souvenirs? Stet, of course. No reason why we couldn't have artifacts brought from home, Gryblow suddenly grumbled. Tarb pulled herself back from her thoughts. I suppose Stet wouldn't let you, she said. But now that one Scripto's here, she went on somewhat complacently, he'll have to keep this planet charming and unspoiled, he says. Gryblow interrupted ungratefully. Its spiritual values will be corrupted by too much contact with a crass advanced technology. And, of course, he's got the local camera manufacturers solidly behind him. I wonder whether they advertise in the Times because he helps keep artifacts off Terra, or whether he keeps the artifacts off Terra because they advertise in the Times. But what does he care about advertising? He may talk as if he owned the Times, but he doesn't. Gryblow gave a nasty laugh. No, he doesn't, but if the Terran edition didn't show a profit, it'd fold quicker than you can flip your wings, and he'd have to go back to nasty old up-to-date Fizzbus as a lowly sub-editor. And he wouldn't like that one bit. Our Stet, as you may have noticed, is fond of running things to suit himself. But Mr. Group told me that the Times isn't interested in money. It's running this edition of the paper only as a service to, oh, I suppose all that was a lot of birdseed, too. Group. Griblow snorted. The sanctimonious old buzzard. He's a big stockholder on the paper. Bet you didn't know that, did you? All they're out for is money. Fizbian money, terrestrial money, so long as it's cash. Tell me, Griblow Tarb asked, what does "when in Rome, do as the Romans do" mean? Griblow grinned sourly. Stet's favorite motto. He moved along the seat closer to her. I'll tell you what it means, chicken. When on Earth, don't be a Fizbian. The consul's wife, an old mauve creature, did not seem over pleased to see Tarb, since the younger, prettier Fizbian definitely took the spotlight away from her. The press had, of course, seen Tarb before, but at that time they hadn't been able to communicate directly with her, and they didn't, she now found out, think nearly as much of Stet as he did of them. Tarb couldn't attempt to deviate much from Stet's questions, for the consul's wife was not very cooperative, and the consul himself watched both women narrowly. He was a good friend of Stet's, Tarb knew, and apparently Stet had taken the other man into his confidence. When the interviews were over and the consular party had left, Tarb remained to chat with the terrestrial journalists. Despite Griblow's worried objections, she joined them in the Moonfield restaurant, where she daringly partook of a cup of coffee and then another and another. After that, things weren't very clear. She dimly remembered the other reporters assuring her that she shouldn't disfigure her lovely wings with a stole, and then pirouetting in the air over the bar to prolonged applause, and then she was in the taxi again with Griblow shaking her. Wake up, Tarb, we're almost at the office. Stet'll have me plucked for this. Tarb sat up and pushed her crest out of her eyes. The sky was growing dark. They must have been gone a long time. I'll never hear the end of this, Griblow moaned. Why, if only he could get someone to fill my place, Stet would fire me like a shot. Not that I wouldn't quit if I could get another job. Oh, it'll be mostly me he'll be mad at. Tarb pulled out her compact. Stet had warned her not to polish her eyeballs in public, but the ground with him. Her head hurt. And her feathers, she saw in the mirror, had turned almost beige. She looked horrible. She felt horrible. And Stet would probably think she was horrible. When Stet's mad, Griblow prophesied darkly, he's mad at everybody. And Stet was mad. He was waiting in the newsroom, his emerald blue eyes blazing as if he had not only polished but lacquered them. What's the idea of taking 6 hours to cover a simple story? He shouted as soon as the door began to open. Aside from the trivial matter of a deadline to be met, Griblow, where's Tub? Nothing's happened to her, has it? Nah, Griblow said, unslinging his camera. She took a shortcut, only she got held up by a terrace. Snagged her umbrella on it, I believe. I heard her yelling when I was waiting for the elevator. I didn't know nice girls knew language like that. She should be up any minute now. There she is. He pointed to a window, through which the leesome form of the young feature writer could be seen, tapping on the glass in order to attract attention. Somebody better open it for her, the cameraman suggested. Probably not meant to open from the outside. Not many people come in that way, I guess. Open-mouthed, the whole newsroom stared at the window. Finally the copy editor got up and let a dripping tub in. Nearly thought I wouldn't make it, she observed, shaking herself in a flurry of wet pink feathers. The rest of the staff ducked, most of them too late. Umbrella didn't do much good, she continued, closing it. It left a little puddle on the rug. My wings got soaked right away. She tossed her wet crest out of her eyes. Golly, but it's good to fly again. Haven't done it for months, but it seems like years. Her eye caught Miss Snow's. You don't know what you're missing. Tarbstead thundered, you've been drinking coffee. Griblow. But the cameraman had nimbly sought sanctuary in the dark room. You'd better go home, Tub. When Stet's eye tufts met across his nose, he was downright ugly, she realized. Griblow can give me the dope and I'll write up the story myself. I can fill it out with canned copy. And you and I will discuss this situation in the morning. Won't go home when there's work to be done. Duty calls me. Giving a brief and quite recognizable imitation of a terrestrial trumpet, Tarb stalked down the corridor to her office. Drozmig looked up from his perch, to which he was still miraculously clinging at that hour. So it got you, too. Sorry, nice girl. It hasn't got me, Tarb replied, picking up a letter marked urgent. I've got it. She scanned the letter, then made hastily for Stet's office. He sat drumming on his desk with the antique stainless steel spatula he used as a paper knife. Read this, she demanded, thrusting the letter into his face. Read this, you traitor, sacrificing our whole civilization to what's most expedient for you. Hypocrite. Cad. Tub, listen to me. Read it. She slapped the letter down in front of him. Read it and see what you've done to us. Sure, we Fisbians keep to ourselves, and so the only people who know anything about us are the ones who want to sell us brushes, while the people who want to help us don't know a damn thing about us and, oh, all right. I'll read it if you'll only keep quiet. He turned the letter right side up. Johannesburg, dear Senbert Drozmig, I represent the Zoglion Publishing Company, Inc., of which I know you have heard, since your paper has seen fit to give our books some of the most unjust reviews on record. However, be that as it may, I have opened an office on Earth with the laudable purpose of effecting an interchange of respective literatures, to see which terrestrial books might most profitably be translated into Thisbian, and which of the authors on our own list might have potential appeal for the Earth reader. Dealing with authors is, of course, a nerve-wracking business, and I soon found myself in dire need of mental treatment. What was my horror to find that this primitive, although charming, planet had no neurotones, no psychoscopes, not even any cerebrophones, in fact, no psychiatric machines at all. The very knowledge of this brought me several degrees closer to a breakdown. Perhaps I should have consulted you at this juncture, but I admit I was a bit of a snob. What sort of advice can a mere journalist give me, I thought, that I could not give myself? So, more for amusement than anything else, I determined to consult a native practitioner. After all, I said to myself, a good laugh is a step forward on the road to recovery. Accordingly, I went to see this native fellow. They work entirely without machines, I understand, using something like witchcraft. At the same time, I thought I might pick up some material for a jolly little book on primitive customs which I could get some unknown writer to throw together inexpensively. Strong human interest items like that always have great reader appeal. The native chap, Doctor, he calls himself, was most cordial, which he should have been at the price I was paying him. One thing I must say about these natives, backward they may be, but they have a very shrewd commercial sense. You can't even imagine the trouble I had getting those authors to sign even remotely reasonable contracts, which in part accounts for my mental disturbance, I suppose. Well, anyway, I handed the native a privacy waiver carefully filled out in Terran. He took it, smiled and said, "We'll discuss this afterward. My contact lenses have disappeared. I suppose one of my patients has stolen them again. Can't see a thing without them." So we sat down and had a bit of a chat. He seemed remarkably intelligent for a native, never interrupted me once. "You are definitely in great trouble," he told me when I'd finished. "You need to be psychoanalyzed." Good, I said. "I see I've come to the right shop. Now just lie down and make yourself comfortable." "Lie down?" I repeated, puzzled. I have an excellent command of Terran, but every now and then an idiom will throw me. I tell the truth, sir, and when I am required by force of circumstances to lie, I lie up. "No," he said, "not that kind of lying. You know, the kind you do at night when you go to sleep." "Oh, I get you," I said idiomatically. Without further ado, I flung off my ulster and flew up to a thingummy hanging from the ceiling. Chandelier, I believe, is the native term, flipped upside down, and hung from it by my toes. Wasn't the presidential perch, by any means, but it wasn't bad at all. "What do I do next?" I inquired affably. "My dear fellow," the chap said, whipping out a notebook from the recesses of his costume, "how long have you had this delusion that you are a bird, or is it a bat?" "Sir," I said as haughtily as my position permitted, "I am neither a bird nor a bat. I am a Thisbian. Surely you have heard of Thisbians?" "Yes, yes, of course. They come from another country or planet or something. Frankly, politics is a bit outside my sphere. All I'm interested in is people, and Thisbians are people, aren't they?" "Yes, certainly. If anything, it's you who." "Yes, they are people." "Well, tell me then, Mr. Lisnig, when was it you first started thinking you were a bat or a bird?" I tried to control myself. "I am neither a bird nor a bat. I am a Thisbian. I have wings. See. I fluttered them." He peered at me. "I wish I could," he said regretfully. "Without my glasses, though, I'm as blind as a bat, or a bird." Well, the long and the short of it is that the natives are planning to certify me as insane and incarcerate me, pending the doctor's decision as to whether my delusion is that I am a bird or a bat. They are using my privacy waiver as commitment papers. Save me, Senbert Drosmig, for I feel that if I have to wait for the doctor's glasses to be delivered, I shall indeed go mad. "Distractedly yours, Tgos Lisnig." "I'll handle this myself," Stet said crisply. "I'll tell the consul to advise the Terran State Department that this man should be deported as an undesirable alien. That'll solve the problem neatly. We can't have this contaminating the pure stream of terrestrial literature with, but aren't you going to explain to them that he's perfectly sane?" Tarb gasped. "No need to bother. He'll be grateful enough to get off the planet. Besides, how do I know he is perfectly sane? Stetsonen, you're perfectly horrid. And you, Tarb Morfarch, are disgustingly drunk. Now you go right home and sleep it off. I know I was too harsh with you, my fault for letting you go out alone with Griblo in the first place when you've been here only a few months. Might have known those Terran journalists would lead you astray. Nice fellows, but irresponsible." He flicked out his tongue. "There, I've apologized. Now will you go home?" "Home?" Tarb shrieked. "Home when there's work to be done and you're not going to be the one to do it." "Tarb," he said, attempting to seize her foot, which she pulled away, "I was going to tell you tomorrow, but you might as well know tonight. I've taken you off the column for good. I have a better job for you." She looked at him. "A better job? Are you being sarcastic?" "What as?" "As my wife." He got up and came over to her. She stood still, almost stunned. "That solves the whole problem tidily. An office is no place for you, darling, you're really a simple home girl at heart. Newspaper work is too strenuous for you, it upsets you and makes you nervous and irritable. I want you to stay home and take care of our house and hatch our eggs, unostentatiously, of course." "Why, you," she spluttered. He put his foot over her mouth. "Don't give me your answer now. You're in no condition to think. Tell me tomorrow. It rained all night and continued on into the morning. Tarb's head ached, but she had to make an appearance at the office. First she visited an acquaintance she had made the day before, then she took her umbrella and set forth. As she kicked open the door to the newsroom, all sound ceased. Voices stopped abruptly. Typewriters halted in mid-click. Even the roar of the presses downstairs suddenly seemed to mute. Every head turned to look at Tarb. Humph, she thought, removing her plastic oversocks, so suppose I was a little oblique yesterday. They needn't stare at me. They never stare at Droz Mig. Just because I'm a woman, I suppose. The gate crashed loudly behind her. Oh, Miss Morfarch, Miss Snow called. Mr. Zenon said he wanted to see you as soon as you came in. It's urgent. And she giggled. Really? Tarb said. Well, he'll just have to wait until I've wrung out my wings. Sooner or later, she would have to face Stet, but she wanted to put it off as long as possible. She opened the door to her office and halted in amazement. For, seated on a stool behind the desk, haggard but vertical, was Senbert Droz Mig, busily reading letters and blue penciling comments on them with his feet. Good morning, my dear, he said, giving her a wan smile. Surprised to see me functioning again, eh? Well, yes. She opened her dripping umbrella mechanically and stood it in a corner. How, I realized last night that all that happened to you was my fault. You were my responsibility and I failed you. Oh, don't be melodramatic, Senbert. I wasn't your responsibility and you didn't fail me. Not that I'm not glad to see you up and doing again, but I did fail you, the aged journalist insisted. And, in the same way, I failed my people. I shouldn't have given in. I should have fought Zenon as you, my dear, tried to do. But it isn't too late. The fire of the Crusader lit up in his watery old eyes. I can still fight him and his sacred crows, his earthlings. If I have to, I can go over his head to Group. Group may not understand Stet's moral failings, but he certainly will comprehend his commercial ones. Group owns stock in other Fisbian enterprises besides the Times. Autofax, for example. Oh, Senbert. Tarb wailed. The whole thing's such an awful mess. I don't think it'll be necessary to threaten that far, he comforted her. Stet is no fool. He knows which side of his bread nut is peeled. I'm sure you'll do a wonderful job, she exclaimed, impulsively giving a ritual entry chat. And I wish I could stay and help you, but I know, my dear. You do. She was puzzled. But how did the news get around so quickly? He shrugged. The terrestrial grapevine is almost as efficient as the Fisbian. Didn't you notice any change in the atmosphere when you came in? Oh, was that the reason? Tarb laughed merrily. Somehow it never occurred to me that they could have heard so soon. but the morning editions have been out for hours. The door to the office was flung open. Stet stormed in, bristling with a most unlover-like rage. "Miss Morfarch," he waved a crumpled copy of the Terrestrial Tribune at her, "when I give an order, I expect to be obeyed. Didn't Miss Snow tell you to report directly to my office the instant you came in? Although that's a question I don't have to ask, I know Miss Snow, at least, is someone I can trust." "I was coming to see you," Stet Tarb said soothingly. "Right away." "Oh, you were you? And have you seen this?" Stet fairly threw the paper at her. Smack in the middle of the front page was a picture of herself in full flight over the airfield bar. Not a very good picture, but what could you expect with terrestrial equipment? When the autofax came, perhaps she would be done justice. Fisbian Newton gives Earth a flutter though no mammal. "I pack a lot of uplift," says beautiful Fisbian gal reporter. "I feel that you Terrans and we Fisbians can get along much better." Lovely Tarb Morfarch, Fisbus Times feature writer, told her fellow reporters yesterday at the Moonfield restaurant, "If we learn to understand each other's differences as well as appreciate our similarities." With commerce between the two planets expanding as rapidly as it has been, Miss Morfarch went on, "it becomes increasingly important that we make sure there is no clash of mores between us. Where adaptation is impossible, we must both adjust. When in Rome, do as the Romans do is an outmoded concept in the complex interstellar civilization of today. The Romans must learn to accept us as we are, and vice versa." "Forgive me if I've offended you by my frankness," she said, sticking out her tongue in the charming gesture of apology that is acquiring such a vogue on Earth, Belinda Romney and many other socialites having enthusiastically adopted it, "but you've violated our privacy so many times, I feel I'm entitled to hurt your feelings just a teeny-weeny bit." "Those Terran journalists," Tarb said admiringly. "Never miss a trick, do they? Am I in all the other papers too, Stet? Same cheesecake. You've made an ovulating circus out of us, that's what you've done." "Nonsense. Good strong human interest stuff, it'll make us lovable as chicks all over the planet." "Gee," she read on, "did I say all that while I was caffeinated? I ought to turn out some pretty terrific copy sober. And to think you, the woman I had asked to make my wife, did this to me." "Oh, that's all right," Stet Tarb said without looking up from the paper. "I wasn't going to accept you, anyway." "Good for you," Tarb Drozmig approved. "You're going back to Fisbus on the next liner, do you hear me?" Stet raged. She smiled sunnily. "Oh, but I'm not, Stet. I'm going to stay right here on Earth. I like it. You might say the spiritual aura got me." He snorted. "How can you possibly stay? You don't have an independent income and this is an expensive planet. Besides, I won't let you stay on Earth. I have considerable influence, you know." Poor Stet. She smiled at him again. "I'm afraid the Fisbian press, the Fisbian console even, are pretty small pullets beside the Solar Press Syndicate. You see, I came in this morning only to resign." He stared at her. Yesterday she informed him, "I was offered another position, as feature writer for the SP. I hadn't decided whether or not to accept when I reported back last evening, but you made up my mind for me, so I called them this morning and took the job. My work will be to explain Fisbians to Terrans and Terrans to Fisbians, as I wanted to do for the Times, Stet, only you wouldn't let me. It's no use saying anything to you about loyalty, I suppose." "None whatsoever," she said. "I owe the Times no loyalty and I'm doing what I do out of loyalty to Fisbus, plus, of course, a much higher salary." "I'm glad for you," Tarbdrosmig said sincerely. "Be glad for yourself, Senbert, because Stet will have to let you conduct the column your way from now on. Either it'll supplement my work in the terrestrial papers or he'll look like a fool. And you do hate looking like a fool, don't you, Stet?" He didn't answer. "Better give up, Stet." She turned to Drosmig. "Well, goodbye, Senbert, or, rather, so long. I'm sure we'll be seeing each other again." "Goodbye, Stet. No hard feelings, I hope." He neither moved nor spoke. "Well, goodbye, then," she said. The door closed. Stet stared after her. The forgotten umbrella dripped forlornly in the corner. Asterisk 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 end of the Project Gutenberg ebook helpfully yours asterisk 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 updated editions will replace the previous one, the old editions will be renamed. Creating the works from print editions not protected by U.S. copyright law means that no one owns a United States copyright in these works, so the Foundation, and you, can copy and distribute it in the United States without permission and without paying copyright royalties. Special rules, set forth in the general terms of use part of this license, apply to copying and distributing Project Gutenberg trademark symbol electronic works to protect the Project Gutenberg trademark symbol concept and trademark. Project Gutenberg is a registered trademark, and may not be used if you charge for an ebook, except by following the terms of the trademark license, including paying royalties for use of the Project Gutenberg trademark. If you do not charge anything for copies of this ebook, complying with the trademark license is very easy. You may use this ebook for nearly any purpose such as creation of derivative works, reports, performances and research. Project Gutenberg ebooks may be modified and printed and given away. You may do practically anything in the United States with ebooks not protected by U.S. copyright law. Redistribution is subject to the trademark license, especially commercial redistribution. Start. Full license. The full Project Gutenberg license. Please read this before you distribute or use this work to protect the Project Gutenberg trademark symbol mission of promoting the free distribution of electronic works, by using or distributing this work, or any other work associated in any way with the phrase Project Gutenberg. you agree to comply with all the terms of the full Project Gutenberg trademark symbol license available with this file or online at www.gutenberg.org/license. Section 1. General Terms of Use and Redistributing Project Gutenberg Trademark Symbol Electronic Works 1.0. By reading or using any part of this Project Gutenberg trademark symbol electronic work, you indicate that you have read, understand, agree to and accept all the terms of this license and intellectual property, trademark/copyright, agreement. If you do not agree to abide by all the terms of this agreement, you must cease using and return or destroy all copies of Project Gutenberg trademark symbol electronic works in your possession. If you paid a fee for obtaining a copy of or access to a Project Gutenberg trademark symbol electronic work and you do not agree to be bound by the terms of this agreement, you may obtain a refund from the person or entity to whom you paid the fee as set forth in paragraph 1.e.8. 1.b Project Gutenberg is a registered trademark. It may only be used on or associated in any way with an electronic work by people who agree to be bound by the terms of this agreement. There are a few things that you can do with most Project Gutenberg trademark symbol electronic works even without complying with the full terms of this agreement. See paragraph 1.c below. There are a lot of things you can do with Project Gutenberg trademark symbol electronic works if you follow the terms of this agreement and help preserve free future access to Project Gutenberg trademark symbol electronic works. See paragraph 1.e below. 1.c. The Project Gutenberg Literary Archive Foundation, the Foundation or PGLAF, owns a compilation copyright in the collection of Project Gutenberg trademark symbol electronic works. Nearly all the individual works in the collection are in the public domain in the United States. If an individual work is unprotected by copyright law in the United States and you are located in the United States, we do not claim a right to prevent you from copying, distributing, performing, displaying or creating derivative works based on the work as long as all references to Project Gutenberg are removed. Of course, we hope that you will support the Project Gutenberg trademark symbol mission of promoting free access to electronic works by freely sharing Project Gutenberg trademark symbol works in compliance with the terms of this agreement for keeping the Project Gutenberg trademark symbol name associated with the work. You can easily comply with the terms of this agreement by keeping this work in the same format with its attached full Project Gutenberg trademark symbol license when you share it without charge with others. 1.d. The copyright laws of the place where you are located also govern what you can do with this work. Copyright laws in most countries are in a constant state of change. If you are outside the United States, check the laws of your country in addition to the terms of this agreement before downloading, copying, displaying, performing, distributing or creating derivative works based on this work or any other Project Gutenberg trademark symbol work. The Foundation makes no representations concerning the copyright status of any work in any country other than the United States. 1.e unless you have removed all references to Project Gutenberg. 1.e.1. The following sentence, with active links to, or other immediate access to, the full Project Gutenberg trademark symbol license must appear prominently whenever any copy of a Project Gutenberg trademark symbol work, any work on which the phrase Project Gutenberg appears, or with which the phrase Project Gutenberg is associated, is accessed, displayed, performed, viewed, copied or distributed. This ebook is for the use of anyone anywhere in the United States and most other parts of the world at no cost and with almost no restrictions whatsoever. You may copy it, give it away or reuse it under the terms of the Project Gutenberg license included with this ebook or online at www.gutenberg.org. If you are not located in the United States, you will have to check the laws of the country where you are located before using this ebook. 1.e.2. If an individual Project Gutenberg trademark symbol electronic work is derived from texts not protected by U.S. copyright law, does not contain a notice indicating that it is posted with permission of the copyright holder, the work can be copied and distributed to anyone in the United States without paying any fees or charges. If you are redistributing or providing access to a work with the phrase Project Gutenberg associated with or appearing on the work, you must comply either with the requirements of paragraphs 1.e.1 through 1.e.7 or obtain permission for the use of the work and the Project Gutenberg trademark symbol trademark as set forth in paragraphs 1.e.8 or 1.e.9. 1.e.3. If an individual Project Gutenberg trademark symbol electronic work is posted with the permission of the copyright holder, your use and distribution must comply with both paragraphs 1.e.1 through 1.e.7 and any additional terms imposed by the copyright holder. Additional terms will be linked to the Project Gutenberg trademark symbol license for all works posted with the permission of the copyright holder found at the beginning of this work. 1.e.4. Do not unlink or detach or remove the full Project Gutenberg trademark symbol license terms from this work, or any files containing a part of this work or any other work associated with Project Gutenberg trademark symbol. 1.e.5. Do not copy, display, perform, distribute or redistribute this electronic work, or any part of this electronic work, without prominently displaying the sentence set forth in paragraph 1.e.1 with active links or immediate access to the full terms of the Project Gutenberg trademark symbol license. 1.e.6. You may convert to and distribute this work in any binary, compressed, marked up, non-proprietary or proprietary form, including any word processing or hypertext form. However, if you provide access to or distribute copies of a Project Gutenberg trademark symbol work in a format other than plain vanilla ASCII or other format used in the official version posted on the official Project Gutenberg trademark symbol website, www.gutenberg.org, you must, at no additional cost, fee or expense to the user, provide a copy, a means of exporting a copy, or a means of obtaining a copy upon request, of the work in its original plain vanilla ASCII or other form. Any alternate format must include the full Project Gutenberg trademark symbol license as specified in paragraph 1.e.1. 1.e.7. Do not charge a fee for access to, viewing, displaying, performing, copying or distributing any Project Gutenberg trademark symbol works unless you comply with paragraph 1.e.8 or 1.e.9. 1.e.8. You may charge a reasonable fee for copies of or providing access to or distributing Project Gutenberg trademark symbol electronic works provided that you pay a royalty fee of 20% of the gross profits you derive from the use of Project Gutenberg trademark symbol works calculated using the method you already use to calculate your applicable taxes. The fee is owed to the owner of the Project Gutenberg trademark symbol trademark, but he has agreed to donate royalties under this paragraph to the Project Gutenberg Literary Archive Foundation. Royalty payments must be paid within 60 days following each date on which you prepare, or are legally required to prepare, your periodic tax returns. Royalty payments should be clearly marked as such and sent to the Project Gutenberg Literary Archive Foundation at the address specified in Section 4, Information about donations to the Project Gutenberg Literary Archive Foundation. You provide a full refund of any money paid by a user who notifies you in writing, or by email, within 30 days of receipt that he does not agree to the terms of the full Project Gutenberg trademark symbol license. You must require such a user to return or destroy all copies of the works possessed in a physical medium and discontinue all use of and all access to other copies of Project Gutenberg trademark symbol works. You provide, in accordance with paragraph 1.f.3, a full refund of any money paid for a work or a replacement copy, if a defect in the electronic work is discovered and reported to you within 90 days of receipt of the work. You comply with all other terms of this agreement for free distribution of Project Gutenberg trademark symbol works. 1.e.9. If you wish to charge a fee or distribute a Project Gutenberg trademark symbol electronic work or group of works on different terms than are set forth in this agreement, you must obtain permission in writing from the Project Gutenberg Literary Archive Foundation, the manager of the Project Gutenberg trademark symbol trademark. Contact the Foundation as set forth in Section 3 below. 1.f1.f.1. Project Gutenberg volunteers and employees expend considerable effort to identify, do copyright research on, transcribe and proofread works not protected by U.S. copyright law in creating the Project Gutenberg trademark symbol collection. Despite these efforts, Project Gutenberg trademark symbol electronic works, and the medium on which they may be stored, may contain defects such as, but not limited to, incomplete, inaccurate or corrupt data, transcription errors, a copyright or other intellectual property infringement, a defective or damaged disk or other medium, a computer virus, or computer codes that damage or cannot be read by your equipment. 1.f.2. Limited warranty. Disclaimer of damages, except for the right of replacement or refund described in paragraph 1.f.3. The Project Gutenberg Literary Archive Foundation, the owner of the Project Gutenberg trademark symbol trademark, and any other party distributing a Project Gutenberg trademark symbol electronic work under this agreement, disclaim all liability to you for damages, costs and expenses, including legal fees. You agree that you have no remedies for negligence, strict liability, breach of warranty or breach of contract except those provided in paragraph 1.f.3. You agree that the foundation, the trademark owner, and any distributor under this agreement will not be liable to you for actual, direct, indirect, consequential, punitive or incidental damages even if you give notice of the possibility of such damage. 1.f.3. Limited right of replacement or refund. If you discover a defect in this electronic work within 90 days of receiving it, you can receive a refund of the money, if any, you paid for it by sending a written explanation to the person you received the work from. If you received the work on a physical medium, you must return the medium with your written explanation. The person or entity that provided you with the defective work may elect to provide a replacement copy in lieu of a refund. If you received the work electronically, the person or entity providing it to you may choose to give you a second opportunity to receive the work electronically in lieu of a refund. If the second copy is also defective, you may demand a refund in writing without further opportunities to fix the problem. 1.f.4. Except for the limited right of replacement or refund set forth in paragraph 1.f.3, this work is provided to you as is, with no other warranties of any kind, express or implied, including but not limited to warranties of merchantability or fitness for any purpose. 1.f.5. Some states do not allow disclaimers of certain implied warranties or the exclusion or limitation of certain types of damages. If any disclaimer or limitation set forth in this agreement violates the law of the state applicable to this agreement, the agreement shall be interpreted to make the maximum disclaimer or limitation permitted by the applicable state law. The invalidity or unenforceability of any provision of this agreement shall not void the remaining provisions. 1.f.6. Indemnity. You agree to indemnify and hold the foundation, the trademark owner, any agent or employee of the foundation, anyone providing copies of Project Gutenberg trademark symbol electronic works in accordance with this agreement, and any volunteers associated with the production, promotion and distribution of Project Gutenberg trademark symbol electronic works, harmless from all liability, costs and expenses, including legal fees, that arise directly or indirectly from any of the following which you do or cause to occur. A. Distribution of this or any Project Gutenberg trademark symbol work. B. Alteration, modification, or additions or deletions to any Project Gutenberg trademark symbol work, and C. Any defect you cause. Section 2. Information about the mission of Project Gutenberg trademark symbol. Project Gutenberg trademark symbol is synonymous with the free distribution of electronic works in formats readable by the widest variety of computers, including obsolete, old, middle-aged and new computers. It exists because of the efforts of hundreds of volunteers and donations from people in all walks of life. Volunteers and financial support to provide volunteers with the assistance they need are critical to reaching Project Gutenberg trademark symbol's goals and ensuring that the Project Gutenberg trademark symbol collection will remain freely available for generations to come. In 2001, the Project Gutenberg Literary Archive Foundation was created to provide a secure and permanent future for Project Gutenberg trademark symbol and future generations. To learn more about the Project Gutenberg Literary Archive Foundation and how your efforts and donations can help, see sections 3 and 4 and the Foundation information page at www.gutenberg.org. Section 3. Information about the Project Gutenberg Literary Archive Foundation. The Project Gutenberg Literary Archive Foundation is a non-profit 501(c)(3) educational corporation organized under the laws of the state of Mississippi and granted tax-exempt status by the Internal Revenue Service. The Foundation's IN or Federal Tax Identification Number is 64-6221541. Contributions to the Project Gutenberg Literary Archive Foundation are tax-deductible to the full extent permitted by U.S. federal laws and your state's laws. The Foundation's business office is located at 809 North 1500 West, Salt Lake City, UT 84116, 801-596-1887. Email contact links and up-to-date contact information can be found at the Foundation's website and official page at www.gutenberg.org/contact section 4. Information about donations to the Project Gutenberg Literary Archive Foundation. Project Gutenberg trademark symbol depends upon and cannot survive without widespread public support and donations to carry out its mission of increasing the number of public domain and licensed works that can be freely distributed in machine-readable form accessible by the widest array of equipment, including outdated equipment. Many small donations, $1 to $5,000, are particularly important to maintaining tax-exempt status with the IRS. The Foundation is committed to complying with the laws regulating charities and charitable donations in all 50 states of the United States. Compliance requirements are not uniform and it takes a considerable effort, much paperwork and many fees to meet and keep up with these requirements. We do not solicit donations in locations where we have not received written confirmation of compliance. To send donations or determine the status of compliance for any particular state, visit www.gutenberg.org/donate. While we cannot and do not solicit contributions from states where we have not met the solicitation requirements, We know of no prohibition against accepting unsolicited donations from donors in such states who approach us with offers to donate. International donations are gratefully accepted, but we cannot make any statements concerning tax treatment of donations received from outside the United States. U.S. laws alone swamp our small staff. Please check the Project Gutenberg web pages for current donation methods and addresses. Donations are accepted in a number of other ways, including checks, online payments and credit card donations. To donate, please visit www.gutenberg.org/donate. Section 5. General information about Project Gutenberg Trademark Symbol Electronic Works. Professor Michael S. Hart was the originator of the Project Gutenberg trademark symbol concept of a library of electronic works that could be freely shared with anyone. For 40 years, he produced and distributed Project Gutenberg trademark symbol ebooks with only a loose network of volunteer support. Project Gutenberg trademark symbol ebooks are often created from several printed editions, all of which are confirmed as not protected by copyright in the US unless a copyright notice is included. Thus, we do not necessarily keep ebooks in compliance with any particular paper edition. Most people start at our website, which has the main PG search facility, www.gutenberg.org. This website includes information about Project Gutenberg trademark symbol, including how to make donations to the Project Gutenberg Literary Archive Foundation, how to help produce our new ebooks, and how to subscribe to our email newsletter to hear about new ebooks.